Truly grateful for the comments and your thoughts. This has been a treat. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I wanted to open the floor for questions. There's two different ways to ask questions here. You can either walk up to one of the microphones on the either side of the room, or you could write your comments on a small card that might be given to you and pass it on for me to read it to our panelists here. So without further ado, we start the questions process, and please.
Mine is more of some feedback. I was a bit beaten up by my father till I was 15, but alcoholism had a lot to do with it, and also I had a stalking case while I'd been at the bank. So first of all, when you said that you work with kids from conception on, a book 2 years ago that I read completely blew my mind because I always wondered why men often have so little feeling. And it said that men and boys and girls, when they're in the womb, have their limbic brain, which is the seat of the emotions, is the same size. But at a certain point in pregnancy, the limbic brain of the boys are soaked in testosterone for 3 weeks. And afterwards, it comes out much smaller. And apparently that was an evolutionary adaptation to do hunting and hunting or whatever, but it's no longer fit for the 21st century. So I think not only is it the nurture afterwards, but there's actually a physical thing that has been discovered about this. The second thing is when the influence of television. My father threw out our TV in '58. We had it for 3 years. But my nephew, who was 5, he started watching Angry Birds. And when I watched it in Portland, Maine, I could not believe that over and over these kids are getting blow this person, blow. So one day, he was 5 years old. It was Christmas Day. We were putting we put some little dolls in a little sack for a cave and to make a little story. And all of a sudden, he takes this big rod and just goes, and blows it all up. I said, Joey, why would you do that? And last year, one of my colleagues, who's a manager in the MC, she was saying, he's suddenly become acting out a lot. He's really acting bad. I don't know what happened. I said, is he watching Angry Birds? Oh, yeah, we just started Angry Birds. So when you get someone's brain circuit to go around and around 1 billion times about these video games, what can you expect? They think it's a game. And the last thing is, even though you said there's a strong network in the D.C. area, when I had my stalking case, I went to the police department in Cleveland Park, which is the second richest community in D.C., and they had no interest. 40 men put their head up and said, She said, who wants a stalking case? They put their head back down. They sent out the youngest person in the force, who was a woman. She said, I don't even want your name or your number. Luckily, we had the hub here, which Elizabeth is head of. Tanya was my person in the red jacket. They took care of me. They connected me up with the real people in the police department who are responsible, who is the female detectives downtown, who are detectives, not police or civilian police. They've all been abused. They all know what it's about. Where's Helen? Between Helen and Tanya, they took me through it, and it took a long time, and I had to have a protective order for this guy for 4 years. So it was not fun. So I'm just saying, the police department has a long way to go. And then the last thing is, 2 years ago, Elizabeth invited a male who was working with males. And when he came here from New York, he was the first man we'd had at one of these meetings. He says, I don't deal with the perpetrators. He said, I deal with the 60 or 70% of other men who watch it and know about it and don't do anything about it and do not intervene and do not say anything to their their colleagues or their compatriots or their peers, okay?
May have been my dear friend Ted Bunch or Tony Porter or... Well, I just want to, if I could, I just want to comment on one thing. I think it's always dangerous when we get to a place where we start talking about nature and how men are in the womb versus how women, because having 3 children and seeing them the day that they come out, they're helpless. They're at the bottom of the food chain in that moment. And one of the things I know is that what we learn is what we're taught. Right? There's no child in Mississippi that comes out knowing the word nigger. Doesn't exist.
It's true.
They're taught these things. And so I think it's always dangerous when we go down physical development. We're saying that, men are predisposed to be a certain way in evolution. What happens for most of us as men is what we say is, well, look, I was born this way. So we're giving men a pass. As if when you talk about why did she drink, you know how men are, saying that as men we are somehow unable to control our urges. There was a commercial years ago that talked about men think about sex every 2.3 seconds or something like that. And the boys and we used that for a full year as a conversation. Because when you start talking to boys, it's like, well, when you're with your sister, are you thinking about sex? When you're with your mom, are you thinking about sex? What is this commercial saying about who we are as boys and men? And so I think that on the developmental side, It is why it's important that boys and girls are learning very early about a full and total humanity, and not say, well, just because I'm born male, I'm predisposed to do these things. I think that's an important piece. And in terms of media, I use my own children and the children that I work with across the country. I think it's dosage. I can't compete with Madison Avenue. Just walking to and from school, students are going to see media interpretations of gender and relationships. What we think is important is that we give them a lens with which to understand what they're seeing so they can make the right decisions connected to what it is. My children don't eat McDonald's, but they've had McDonald's. And they will tell you when they are, when we drive down the road, my son will say, he's 5, Daddy, I smell chemical food. Because for him, he's connecting that food differently than the food he grows in the garden out back. So we've been intentional in trying to inform their decision-making process as young people, as we do with the other young people we work in our life. The other pieces with the local police department and some of the pieces you said, I'm glad that you've gotten some justice, and yet we continue to work every day to improve that system and make it more equitable and responsive for everyone, not just here in the District of Columbia, but within the region. And I think it's important that, as Mark said earlier, keep coming out and keep challenging, not only us as advocates, but our elected officials to do a better job in the lives of the citizens here in the District of Columbia.
Real quick, I was very proud of Target, which just now changed their aisles. They used to have boys building blocks and girls building blocks.
That's right.
and boys' toys and girls' toys. And let the girls play with trucks, let the boys play with dolls, let the kids play with what they want to play with. And we'll have a little bit less of this socialization that can lead to violence.
That's right.
I wanted to, I'm sorry, what is your name? Alicia. Thank you for bringing up stalking. That's something actually that I've worked at trying to get more people to talk about. When I experienced it in Montgomery County, there was no help. There was no help whatsoever for it. And I'm not saying that DC is any better. It sounds like based on your experience it wasn't. But to talk about it, because it's such a common thing now. It happens everywhere. I hear people throwing around, oh, I Facebook stalked this guy, or I started following him on Instagram, or, little things like that, or I drove past his house to see if he really wasn't home by himself. That's stalking.
What I was going to say, technology makes you can be a lazy stalker now.
Oh, yeah, but it's just as serious and it's just as terrifying for the victim. It's terrifying, and I'm sorry for what you experienced. If anybody's interested, I have resources I can send to you later. It's a stalking manual for anybody who's experienced it or knows someone who's experienced it. All the tools, all the laws in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. So.
Nice. I want a copy of that.
Okay.
To give to constituents.
We will be here, the ones amongst us who can stay will be here for any questions that might exist and won't get mentioned right now, but we have somebody else waiting for another question. Go ahead,
Hi,
please.
my name is Joanne Lucas-Walker. I'm one of the staff relations officers with SA, and I'm an advocate for domestic violence. I know you're also aware that it's a month of anti-bullying, and I believe that the people that commit violence at home do come into corporations and have jobs, and they work among staff. And I'd like to see or to hear from you if there's more of an investment that could go into corporate bullying, because we have human beings that come into organizations who may not be dealing with domestic violence at home, but they come and they deal with these personalities that come into organizations and are faced with bullying, and it's kept under the radar. Just thought I'd bring it to your attention and hear your perspective about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you the reason I became a therapist is because of the bullying I saw in my corporate career. It's there. It's, what are you doing for me today? You're not enough. You're not okay. All of those messages that I was hearing in corporate America, which is why I'm so impressed coming in here and seeing this incredible program that you have. I think bullying is abuse, and I think that it's something that, you're right, needs to be talked about more in the workplace.
I've had many bosses. I've had a lot of different jobs over my life, and I've had abusive bosses who, nothing you could do was ever good enough, was ever right. Probably my best boss was at a law firm when I was a trial lawyer, and I was a new lawyer, and I sent him a brief, and it came back, and there was red all over it. I mean, it was just total. He'd say one word from the page, and the rest would be everything else. And I thought I really failed. But even though I clearly didn't know what I was doing, he would explain exactly why I made a mistake, with no judgment. No judgment. Yeah, he should discipline me. That's what he's supposed to do. I'm a new associate. But he would explain. And so, a year later, only half of the page was covered with red. And a year later, only a couple sentences until people were like, wow, he's not covering your paper already. But it was never, it was never personal. So you do have a right, you have a job as an employer to make sure your employees do what you want them to do. But if you explain things and do it with compassion, you can get the job done, and I would do anything for this boss. I really would. I worked very, very hard to get it right, because I knew he was good, but I also knew that he cared that I got it right and wasn't just trying to say he's my boss and he's in control. So I really appreciated that comment.
I guess I just would add, we had the great fortune and great honor to work with our U.S. Department of Defense and serve all 5 branches, and had a very intimate relationship with our U.S. Marines. And Colonel Christian Cabanis, who is now the Director of Global Operations for the Marine Corps out of the Pentagon, the Colonel would say, that the tone starts at the top. And so when you think about bullying in any kind of work environment, leadership is responsible for the environment. My team is my responsibility. We feel committed for one another. And, Men Can Stop Rape is a very unique environment because we work with a group dynamics counselor once a month to be really intentional about the work we do, engaging violence and thinking about, the intersections of violence. And so I think it's just really important that in the training of leadership, in the training of education professionals or medical professionals or mental health professionals, that, this understanding of this work, gender-based violence, and the environment that it may create, back to the GDP comments we were talking about earlier, that authority comes from the leaders of those institutions, and I think it's critical that we continue improving their leadership skill set around that.
Thank you all for your insights. We have another person in line for a question, then I have a written question that I will read to the audience. Go ahead, please.
Very good. My name is Brad Womble, and I'm from Bethany House of Northern Virginia. We are a shelter for victims or survivors of domestic violence, women and children. And what I want to do today is just say thank you to the World Bank and to those of you that are working in prevention programs and those of you who are committing to bring more beds to Fairfax County. I would like to invite you to Bethany House and to answer our helpline. This morning already, before I came here, I've had to tell women that there is not room. And so they will either be homeless this evening or they will run the risk of being dead. And 50% of homicides now in Fairfax County are at the hands of domestic violence. We cannot stop. We cannot stop. And this is what drives us, Merv and I. For the hours that we work there, we have got to have some help, and we've got to have some more beds because we cannot.
I ran a mail piece. I'm the only candidate in my race that actually mentioned domestic violence.
Very good.
And I had a mail piece showing 1 in 5 women are victims of domestic violence, and there are only 75 beds in all of Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria combined. That's 2 million people. 75 beds, and they're always full. So,
Okay.
yeah, I am committed. As
Thank
you and
you.
I are going to work together. I'm going to get
All
you
right.
some more beds.
Okay, please.
Do my best.
And thank you so much to all of you who are helping.
Thank you for that work, because we all, anyone who's doing it, and Tali can speak to it, that's really difficult work. And I think not only is it not on the news, but people don't understand. And I'll be real clear as a resident of the area, with all the cranes and all the development that's going on in this area,
We can afford
for
a few
us
more
to say
beds.
that we couldn't put a few more beds in Virginia, Northern Virginia and elsewhere is a challenge to us all. So thank you all for the great work and hard work that you all do serving people.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we have time for just 2 more questions. We have one person who is waiting in line, and I have one comment that I'm going to read. If you don't mind, let me read this because I have received it a few minutes ago. The comment on this card says, "What can a woman like me do about custody issues where a divorce has been finalized?" I send my daughter to her father every week, to a man who has been emotionally and physically abusive to me and tried to kill me. I fear for her safety, but can't do much. Any comments or insights on that?
Well, I've been through this, and it's very hard. And let me be honest with you. I come from a family of lawyers. I come from an upper middle class family. I fully recognize that I have privilege and that the vast majority of people in my situation would have ended up with their sister dead and the children not coming home. So I recognize the advantages I had. One of the reasons why I want to give other people these advantages is because I've had them. I think that, and again, every custody case is different, and there's all, I don't know where it is in the courts, I don't know whether it's a final decision or whatever, but none of these decisions should ever be final. You're always allowed to bring in new information. And I think one of the best ways is to try to get a guardian ad litem appointed, a court representative, a neutral person who's never met you or your family, to come in and to monitor it. I can tell you in our cases, there were several GLLs appointed. Usually, my former brother-in-law charmed the pants off them for about a month. And then usually these GALs were pretty good, and they could see through it. And they would interview the children, and they would watch the dynamics. They could see that my parents were very good to those children, and their father was not. So don't be silent. Tell people. Tell your friends, tell your family, call a domestic abuse hotline, call, if you live in Fairfax, call the Fairfax Child Welfare. Let people know. They used to say in the AIDS era, silence equals death. The most dangerous thing you can do is be silent. So whoever she is, I hope she's listening, tell someone, tell everyone. Don't give up, because it took me 10 years. Don't give up.
Thank you so much. Your question, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a comment? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with anything having to do with the legal system, although I have seen a lot of cases where things have gone not right because of laws. But my suggestion to you is to seek some mental health support. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you emotionally, but get that support. You're not alone in it. There are services to receive free counseling. There are support groups for other people going through that, fathers, mothers, other relatives. Make sure that you do have a support system so that when things outside of our control happens, that you're not left feeling like you're alone.
I guess I just would add, just in support of this individual and not knowing where they are and what the circumstance is, but if you have access to the internet and can find some of the national hotlines to guide you directly to what resources may be specifically in your area for mental health services, for legal services, for children protective services, that information is out there. Those resources do exist at the national level, and it'll direct you locally to the resources that you need, and that way you can have a team, regardless of your socioeconomic background, and you may not be able to navigate it, as well as you would like. There are resources there. You are not alone. There are many of us out here waiting for your call or for our insights to support you. So please be proactive in it, and know that we will be welcomed as best we can possibly do wherever you are. So not just here in DC, but across the country and the world, a lot of people doing great work to try to help others.
Thank you so much. We're ready for your question.
My name is Nadine Parks, and I am the Domestic Abuse Prevention Court User Coordinator at the IMF, and I work together with Elizabeth. My question for you, and anyone on the panel can answer this, is you've all done great work, and I found this presentation to be extremely beneficial and interesting. But how, I know that your organization is basically established, but how do you overcome those obstacles in the initial stages to get buy-in from, you'd say, naysayers or people who are skeptical of the work that you do or you'd like to do? What are some of the challenges that you face? I'm just curious as to what techniques or what did you employ in order to move forward with your agenda, even though you may have a lot of challenges, negativities, or obstacles along the way, both individual and it could be policy or whatever it may be. Yeah.
I think the most powerful thing anyone can do is tell their story. I went to Tennessee, which is not known as the most progressive state in the United States, And I told right-wing Republicans, and I'm a liberal Democrat, told them my story, and the bill was unanimous. The power of your story, your family's story, I liken it to what the LGBT community has done. Tell your story, because it's an empathetic story, and most people have empathy, and they may not think it's necessary until you tell your story. And you can give all the statistics about GDP you want, and we as intellectuals understand that's a huge number. And you could talk about 1 in 5 women, and we understand that's a huge number. But if you tell your story, one story, I would argue is more powerful than a book of statistics. And that's, again, why I urge this coming out process.
Yes.
Okay.
Good cosign. In adding to it, a couple of things that have worked for me. One of them is when there is something I feel very strongly about, I don't like no. I don't accept it. I think if it's something I feel very strongly about that would help others, I will find someone that will say yes, and I will keep asking until I get that.
Yeah, we did that a lot.
It works. And the other one is frame it in a way that people will receive it. The program that I was mentioning earlier, we called it Is It Love? Is It Love can be anything. It can be anything having to do with your relationships with any part of your life. Make it something that's approachable, because I'm a lot more likely to attend a program that doesn't feel like it's the trauma group, the domestic violence, something that's taboo, something that's not approachable. So make it approachable. Use marketing techniques. It's kind of like, think of it like you're throwing a party and you can send an invitation saying, come mourn with us. or you can say when it says, hey, I'm having a party, come celebrate with us. Celebrate love, celebrate life, celebrate healthy relationships. Make it approachable.
And I guess I just would add ditto. And again, I think it's an invitation, particularly for our work. Look, I'm going into rooms. My colleague Adrian Valdivia, who runs our national training programs on our college campuses and with professionals across the country and globally, we're going into spaces to talk to men about preventing gender-based violence. And we use the language, men's violence against girls and women. Well, if we put that on the flyer, they're probably not showing up. Right? So I think it's a really important point where it's an invitation to use what we know about the psychology, the socialization of men. You know, something happens in my house, I want to fix it. Right? That's what we get taught. Fix it. Go to Home Depot, fix it. Home Depot is for contractors. Lowe's is for families. Lowe's markets towards women. Home Depot markets towards contractors, right? So there's some things that we know about that narrative of being a man. So we try to meet men where they are with an invitation. And in that moment where that young man or adult man or professional credentialed man is in the audience telling me what statistic that he just read that contradicts what I just said, it's never a power struggle for us, but it's always a way for us to hear it, to know that that's where that person is, to thank them for that. We try to role model a relationship we want them to have with others so they don't feel shamed, they don't feel attacked, they don't feel put upon, because as men, as we're supposed to be, we're really sensitive around it because we know how fragile that performance of masculinity really is. So don't call me out. And so I think the invitation is a great way for us to get involved in a way that can sustain beyond our time.
Thank you so much. I have one more question that I wanted to see if maybe one of our, I apologize, there is one question that I have time for. I wanted to see if one of our panelists have an interest in entertaining that. We need to wrap things up.
Maybe you could combine the two. I don't know, Hada, maybe.
Got it. Do you want to read your question to us?
Very quickly, I want to thank you very much. Fabulous, fantastic, congratulations. Superb program. I think that what I would like to do is just build on the previous question, the lady who asked it, say, how do you get an organization to accept this program? How to get a little group? I understand how you get the invitation, you make it palatable. How do you get a big organization to accept it? Please. Thank you.
I will just say that the U.S. Department of Defense is a pretty big organization. And again, it was the leadership, and I think both the current administration and previous administrations, the Vice President's Office on Violence Against Women, they prioritized this, so therefore it was a priority for everyone. So everyone's hearts may not have been moving in the right direction, but their professional expectations were in line with it. And so, to see the Colonel coordinate 2,000 Marines in a 2-week period to be trained around these issues and know that as bystanders, they are responsible. In the Marine Corps, you can go to prison for coming to work late. So there's a boundary there that they put there. And so if we look at what the Department of Defense did as an example of a big entity prioritizing this, it was the leadership that said, we're going to prioritize this. So I think it is about how do we get in front of those leaders? How can we learn from what the World Bank has done? It's leadership that is saying this must happen. And everyone else gets in line, or they have to find a new place of employment. Well, I think it's the thing that we said previously, in my opinion. I think
Let them see your face.
And the benefits to their role and to their work in what it is. I'm going to, Macy's ED talks about, we make more money by having policies around domestic violence and sexual assault on our HR protocols. We make more money. So, Tom,
lost productivity. If they won't respond to compassion and empathy, which you hope they would, then go to GDP numbers and talk about lost productivity. And some people only respond to dollars and cents, but those are real too.
That's right.
Bring those up.
Wherever you can meet them.
Yeah. Whatever works.
So wonderful. I just wanted to let everybody know that even though Tali and Mark, I know, have things lined up that they need to attend to after this event, myself, Neil, Stuart, and Elizabeth, we are going to stick around. If folks still have questions, we would love to absolutely entertain your questions.
I can stay a little bit longer.
I don't have a question. I just
Yes.
have a comment
Please.
to answer to what was said just before. I'm the art curator of the bank, and with Elizabeth and many other people, what we did apropos creating empathy was creating art exhibition and presenting theater exactly to motivate this organization, including our president, the boards, etc., to participate emotionally. I had members of the board, CFO, etc., crying and
Good job.
interpreting the role of a perpetrator or of a survivor. That hopefully will change their decision later on. And this exhibition is now traveling around the world and trying to do the same thing.
That's great. Great story.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to
we need to go.
Elizabeth.
So
Yes.
I'm Elizabeth Legrand, Domestic Abuse Prevention Coordinator for the 3 organizations. And thank you for all coming here today. We have a nice lunch outside. We hope you can join us and maybe have some informal discussion. We have 2 other programs planned for the rest of the next few weeks. At the IDB on October 7th next week, World Bank IMF IDB, you're all invited. And on November 4th at the IMF, and there'll be information on our website, World Bank website, the domestic abuse. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all so much. This was a wonderful